Many people suffer from learning disabilities that impact them throughout their daily lives. For many throughout the United States of America and the world, every day can be a challenge because of their learning disabilities. In this television documentary special, we will be taking a close look at dyslexia and how one doctor implemented a successful method in treating dyslexics by inner ear enhancing medications.
According to statistics, nearly one-third of parents of kids with learning disabilities have feelings of being unprepared to take on the challenge. The most common learning disabilities you may have heard of, such as dyslexia and ADHD. People with learning disabilities tend to struggle academically and socially. Many people have learning disabilities, ranging from young children to adults. The public feels people with learning disabilities do have the resources that are available to them, but the scientific method and the way doctors treat patients gets in the way.
Everybody's different, but if you're talking about certain healthcare programs, helping certain illnesses and stuff like that, I could talk about that all day, you know what I mean?
To be honest, I feel like doctors aren't doing enough to help students and people in general with dyslexia.
It really depends on who you associate yourself with. I do know that there's a lot of counselors that will diagnose you without getting the true facts about a person's history.
I honestly think our doctors should do more things about it. I think we should do more about.
If it becomes a problem that surfaces, then it should definitely be taken care of.
I feel like it's just another label, and another way for them to just generate funds, money.
I think that doctors are using, they're not fully engaged with their patients.
For someone struggling with the dyslexia, it's pretty serious, It's like, can you imagine yourself looking at some sentences in a book and not being able to read that?
But I know there has been a lot of misdiagnosis when it comes to various mental conditions.
I feel like the real doctors are the patients themselves. They do whatever they can to get it through the day. They do whatever they can to get through their lives. And they are helping themselves and each other the best way that they can.
Dyslexia is well known as a learning disability portrayed by reading, writing, and spelling reversals. Dyslexia has been existent throughout the history of mankind, even before writing systems were used. There are many famous people with learning disabilities, including Steven Spielberg and Steve Jobs. Steven Spielberg was diagnosed with dyslexia and struggled academically and socially throughout his years in primary and secondary school.
5 years ago, I was diagnosed as having been dyslexic for my entire life, and which explained a lot of things. It was like the last puzzle part in a tremendous mystery that I've kept to myself all these years. Yeah. That basically started with just things that happen when you're a kid in school and you're a slow reader. Yeah. And in my case, I was actually unable to read for at least 2 years. I was 2 years behind the rest of my class, and of course I went through what everybody goes through, is teasing. Yeah. And I had to go through that for a long time. And so the teasing, led to a lot of other problems I was having in school, but it all stemmed from the fact that I was embarrassed to stand up in front of the class and read.
Spielberg today is an extremely successful filmmaker and has directed and written various motion pictures. He has received many awards in the process for his work.
Give him the whip.
Throw me the idol. No time to argue. Throw me the idol. I throw you the whip.
Steve Jobs, the co-founder of Apple Computer, was also dyslexic, but that didn't stop him from developing the company that still to this day makes some of the best technology on the face of the earth.
Well, how do you solve this? It turns out we have solved it. The first one is a widescreen iPod with touch controls. Second icon from the left on the bottom there, I just touch it with my finger, and boom, I'm there. So, let's look at portable music. Let's look at the landscape. In 1984, we introduced the Macintosh. Number one, we have crossed a major milestone. We have sold over 2 billion songs on iTunes. Amazing. Now, there was
Apple Computer helps everyday Americans, including the learning disabled and mentally challenged, meet their needs.
I define a miracle as something that comes in and changes your life for the better that you did not expect. That you never thought could happen. When Leo was first diagnosed with autism, it really knocked me sideways emotionally, just to think that things would be difficult for my child. You never want anything to be difficult for your child. It's hard for Leo to be independent. It's hard for him to self-direct. But with the iPad, it just makes him happy and independent, and he didn't have that ability before. This is something that my son can do, He doesn't need me. I don't want him to have to need me all the time. So.
If you live in New York City, Great Neck is only a 35-minute train ride from Penn Station, and the Harold N. Levinson Foundation is only a 10-minute walk from the Great Neck train station. Although Great Neck can be known for having its high-ranking public schools and being a great place to raise families, this small town is the place of groundbreaking research on dyslexia.
This is nonsensical. The definition made absolutely no sense. People with a false belief that the disorder was due to a disturbance in the thinking brain were trying to force individuals who had a completely different disorder into a thinking brain impairment mode. Well, I then developed a test called an eye tracking, or a 3D optical scanner. And my first hypothesis was, maybe the reason these dyslexics lost their place when they read is that they had an eye tracking problem, because individuals with ear problems have an eye tracking problem. So I developed a 3D optical scanner that moved letters and words and objects with increasing speed across a screen. And I showed that dyslexics would blur out the letters very rapidly compared to normal controls. What I had done is to test the ability of the eyes to follow moving targets. I had a series of words or elephants move across the screen at increasing speeds. Okay, so now I'm going to speed up the elephants. Believe it or not, dyslexics will start to see those elephants as blurred. Sometimes they may see just one, but the rest are just a blurry mess. But there's a point where every normal individual, as the speed goes higher and higher, will blur out the elephants and they become like a string. So this is what a normal blurs out at, and the difference between normal and those with inner ear cerebellar problems is very often 2 to 1 to 4 to 1 difference. I showed that dyslexics would blur out the letters very rapidly compared to normal controls. What that meant is they had an eye tracking problem. That's why they kept losing their place. That's why they needed a finger or a marker. So the gyroscope in the inner ear that would allow the eyes to track the letters and words in space was off. So they would lose their target. And they would blur the target faster, which is why many dyslexics, if they read slower, or they use a finger as a marker to point out the letter in space, or if the letters are bigger and darker, they read better. If it was a thinking brain problem, like most other experts thought, it would make a difference if the letters were bigger or smaller or wider or whatever, or closer together. And reading something you don't understand slower doesn't make it more comprehensible. And reading something you don't understand, making it bigger, doesn't make it more comprehensible. And if you have a phonetic processing problem where the processors are not able to understand what they're hearing fast enough and clear enough, and if you don't, is altogether different than not understanding. If you're listening to somebody in Russian, you're not going to understand any more Russian that they're talking about if they talk slower. But if you have an auditory processing problem and you understand Russian, if they talk slower, you can process what they say better. I eventually developed a simple theory. I said, if the inner ear and the cerebellum, which is a supercomputer for the inner ear system, acts as a fine-tuner to the thinking brain, as well as for all balance and coordination signals, which it was known to do. If it's an inner ear problem and they also have balance and coordination problems, maybe if I treated the inner ear and the cerebellum with inner ear enhancing medications, like the motion sickness medications, maybe their eye tracking might get better because it was a motor problem. Maybe the writing might get better. Lo and behold, over a period of refining this technique of many years, 85% of patients treated with inner ear improving medications do significantly better, not just in their reading, but in their writing and their spelling. And more things occurred and improved than I even thought of. Their reading improved, their writing improved, their spelling, their math, their memory, speech stuttering decreased, articulation problems decreased or disappeared. Memory was enhanced. Directional problems, people who had difficulty with right and left suddenly knew right and left. They weren't disoriented as before.
On the Medical Watch, listening to the symptoms of ADD and dyslexia and targeting the ear to make a difference.
I knew something was wrong, but I had no idea.
He could not focus very well. He still didn't know how to read in second grade.
I remember I'd have 2-page math tests and I'd finish maybe like the first 3 problems in the time it took the other kids to finish the test.
Then movement in the right direction.
By the end of 3rd grade, he had come a long way. He learned how to read. He was feeling better about himself. Math was much easier.
I'm succeeding in all my classes.
He's doing great in school.
All thanks to an anti-motion drug.
I found that they had an inner ear problem, and I started treating them with anti-motion sickness medications.
Neurologist and psychiatrist Dr. Harold Levinson uses over-the-counter drugs and found they helped with dyslexia, attention deficit, hyperactivity, concentration, and distraction.
If it fine-tunes the signals, the individuals can see better, they can understand better, they can remember better, they can concentrate better, and they can control their activity levels and their impulsivity.
And they can reduce the need for stimulants like Ritalin.
So it's a much safer treatment. It's a much more comprehensive treatment, and it's based on solid knowledge, not just on the basis of symptoms, but neurological tests can actually tell you exactly where the problem is, namely within the inner ear.
It's called vestibular syndrome, and it encompasses so many of the challenges school children face every day.
By properly treating the fine-tuning impairment within the inner ear system in a supercomputer called the cerebellum, what it does, it acts like a fine-tuner to all the stations in the brain.
The treatment has Max Anstedt looking ahead to a career in engineering.
I'm a straight-A student.
He takes accelerated classes in high school, and he's doing terrific.
Dr. Levinson documents his treatment in a book called The Out of Sync Child and the follow-up called Smart But Feeling Dumb. For more information, log on to our webpage, WGNTV.com. On the Medical Watch, Dina Baer, WGN News.
With dyslexia, our understanding is pretty much the same as it always was. The words have just changed, but the concepts are no larger, no broader, and no more explanatory today than they were over 100 years ago.
Today, Dr. Levinson's patients are living better and more productive lives. If you are someone who struggles with learning disabilities, there is always hope around the corner. Resources exist through schools, doctors, therapists, and psychiatrists to help the learning disabled get better. You deserve better, and you can achieve great success.